I was having your boy Rico from RicoScores, and I decided, man, let's go ahead and run that back, man, because I feel like I need to go ahead and knock this out before we move on and all kinds of other things happen. Because by the time we wake up tomorrow, as in Thursday, April 4th, or maybe even Friday, April 5th, maybe we would have signed somebody else. I'm still hoping that we go out and get Justin Simmons at safety. So I feel like let me just go ahead and knock these out. And of course, we re-signed Efe Obada like a couple of weeks ago, but I just never got a chance to talk about him. So I'm going to talk about him in this video, of course, and why that signing may be a little bit more important than you actually think. Also, the Washington Commanders have gone out and signed linebacker Mykal Walker, and we went and got ourselves a Nigerian defensive lineman who's part of the International Pathway Program. We're going to break down exactly what that means and how he's allowed to be on our roster as an extra guy. You're normally only allowed 90 guys, but with him being an international pathway player, he'll be technically like a 91st. And even when it comes to the regular season, we'll be allowed an extra spot somewhere. We're going to dive into all of that. And of course, especially with Mykal Walker's case, are we bringing him in to be a special teams guy? Where does he fit on the depth chart as far as linebacker goes? Are we done at linebacker? Or are we potentially still looking to get another linebacker in the draft? All of that. But before we dive into all of that, make sure you stiff arm that like button, stiff arm the subscription button, and stiff arm the bell next to that subscription button so you get notification each and every time I release an informative and opinionated video just like this one. Make sure you stay tuned because, again, I know I'm on vacation. I'm not home yet, but I'm keeping y'all updated on everything Commanders. I'm even going to bring y'all a top 30 visits updated list because we brought in a couple of really notable guys for some top 30 visits, or at least it's been announced that we will be doing it. And so I'm gonna keep y'all updated on that probably tomorrow, April 4th, because boy, those are some big time prospects that I'm super excited about. One of them's even born and raised in Maryland. So stay tuned for that update. I'm gonna bring y'all tomorrow. But without further ado, man, let's go ahead and get to this video. Let's just focus on what we're doing, one video at a time, Rico, one video at a time. Let's go ahead and get it. Adam. All right, so the Washington Commanders have signed linebacker Mykal Walker. I believe that's how you pronounce it. Mykal. I'm just going to go ahead and go with Mykal Walker. Matter of fact, we're just going to call him Mr. Walker for the remainder of this video. So Mr. Walker, 26 years old, was a 4th round pick by the Atlanta Falcons in 2020 when Dan Quinn was their head coach. So there goes that connection. You know, most of these guys that we bring in, we have some sort of a connection to these guys. Either one of our coaches or front offices, members like that player enough to draft them. Maybe they signed them as a free agent. They've seen them firsthand. Most importantly, like work ethic wise, how are they off the field? Film study. Are they first guy in, last guy out type of thing? I feel like that's where those connections really come in. And also scheme fit. We know if we like them that much coming out of the draft to draft them, then that means that he fits what we like to do here schematically. So that's why those connections matter a lot. And so even after being a 4th round pick by the Atlanta Falcons, his career didn't end up going too well. He ended up becoming a journeyman. He played in 8 games with 5 starts last year for Pittsburgh, though. That's the most impact he's ever had in a season so far in his career outside of being a journeyman. And let's just dive into further detail. So, again, the Atlanta Falcons drafted him 4th round back in 2020 out of Fresno State. Of course, he signed a 4-year, $4 million rookie contract. Then Atlanta opted to waive him last August, and he was subsequently claimed by the Chicago Bears before being among one of their final roster cuts, getting to the 53-man roster. And he had a stint on the Raiders practice squad before the Steelers later signed him to a contract and promoted him to the active roster. And in 2023, Walker appeared in 8 games for the Steelers and recorded 33 total tackles, 2 tackles for loss, 1 interception, and 2 pass deflections. That's relatively productive, man. And he hasn't played much special teams since 2021. Like, really much at all. So unlike Anthony Pittman, who we signed, who's technically a linebacker, but he's purely being brought here from the Detroit Lions, his connection to Lance Newmark, to basically be like a pure special teams ace type of guy, a real special teams core guy that dominates at that. But you don't really expect him to play much linebacker. Whereas this guy in Mykal Walker, he's basically seen as purely a linebacker that plays on defense. At least that's what it seems like from my point of view, based on how other teams have used them. So if we're bringing him in here, he's basically coming in here to be a depth piece type of guy, a guy that you hope makes the 53-man roster. But it's not like Anthony Pittman where, like, yeah, he's a linebacker by title, but he's here for special teams. No, this guy is purely linebacker. So maybe we'll see him on the field on Sundays on defense as a rotational piece when somebody needs like a breather or something like that. And I'm not even going to sit here and pretend and act like we just signed a future Pro Bowler or something, but he does at least look like he's fourth on the depth chart as of how we're currently constructed right now. Before we even get to the depth chart, first of all, if you're taking a look at his Pro Football Focus grades, his rookie season was when he had his highest grade, and it's literally just gone down, 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 down ever since then. So I'm pretty sure he signed to a very cheap 1 year, almost veteran minimum level type of deal for the Commanders. Adam Peters is not playing about getting extreme value out of guys. And if you have any concerns, if you have any question marks, any red flags, it's a 1 year deal for you. I've already done a full breakdown on that in another video. I can't remember which video it was, but basically, if you're over a certain age, like if you're 29 years or old or older, no matter how good you've been in your career, 1 year deal. If you, no matter how young you are, but you just haven't been very productive recently, 1 year deal. He falls under definitely that second category, the latter, where he's young, he's not very old. He's coming in and maybe he's entering his prime. He has some potential to him. It's a very high reward, low risk type of signing. 1 year deal, I'm pretty sure of it. But either way, going back to his Pro Football Focus grades, his grades have just literally gradually gone down every year. In 2020, he had a 74 overall grade, a 71.3 overall grade in 2021, then 2022, a 58.7, and then for the Steelers, he had a 52.9 overall grade, even though technically for the Atlanta Falcons in 2022, the year before that, is when he played his most snaps with 769 with 325 run defense snaps, 60 pass rush snaps, and 384 coverage snaps. So that's probably a better snapshot if you want to watch some of his tape and like really get a feel for when he was on the field the most, how did he look? That's probably the 2022 Falcons tape is probably the one you want to watch. But back in 2020, when he was a rookie, he had a 90.7 coverage grade out of all linebackers on 387 total snaps, but 161 coverage snaps. That's really good. I don't know what's happened since then, but that's an elite grade right there. So if we can come in and we can somehow get him back to that, this can end up being one of the biggest steals in free agency. But I'm not expecting that to happen, which is, again, I'm not acting like we just signed a future Pro Bowler, but I'm just letting you know that there is some talent there. There's some potential. There's flashes of greatness there. It's up to Dan Quinn, Joe Wood Jr., and all of those guys to get consistency out of him, and more so specifically a Ken Norton Jr., who's our linebackers coach. But again, just gradual decrease in Pro Football Focus grade every year. So hopefully that's not his just permanent trajectory, but he did not look good for the Steelers last year. Yep, the 2022 Falcon season was the year that he started the most of his games. He started 5 games last year with the Steelers, which is, surprised quite a few people, but he started 12 in 2022 with the Falcons. So as a rookie, he started 6 games. Sophomore, only started 2. Played in all 17, but only started 2. They just found out immediately, like, this guy just isn't worth putting on the field that often. And then in 2022, they were like, all right, maybe he did something in the offseason, but he started 12 of the 16 games that he played in. And then for the Steelers, he started 5 of the 8 games that he played in. So this is a really interesting guy here. Again, I'm not acting like we just signed a Pro Bowl or anything like that. But if you're looking at the Commanders depth chart, the only people I have ahead of him right now are Jamin Davis, Bobby Wagner, and Frankie Louvu. I think by default, at worst, he's 4th on our depth chart right now out of the linebackers. Because again, Anthony Pittman is a special teams guy. I don't even exactly know who Brandon Boyer Randall is. I don't even remember when we signed him. I'm just looking at the depth chart right now. And then you also have Keandre Jones there as well. Again, I feel like Mykal Walker is probably at worst 4th in the depth chart, but at the same time, I also expect the Commanders to go and draft a linebacker high enough in this upcoming draft that we expect that rookie to come in and be at least 4th in the depth chart, replace Mykal Walker, and then he moves down to 5th in the depth chart. And then we'll see if he ends up making a 53-man roster or not, because the Commanders the last few years have gone with 3 or 4 linebackers on their final 53-man roster going into seasons and things like that. So if you're 5th, it sounds like you're more than likely practice squad, but we'll see how that goes. But either way, again, going back to the fact that we're more than likely going to draft a guy high enough, which means like round 2 or 3, to where it automatically moves Mykal Walker down to 5th on the depth chart by the time we even get to training camp. So maybe we go and get like an Edgerrin Cooper, who some people feel like can maybe make it somewhere into the second round. You have Junior Colson. I'm a big fan of his. I think he's like the perfect like run fit, but they can also cover a guy kind of like to replace Bobby Wagner eventually. I don't think he's Bobby Wagner in his prime, but what Bobby Wagner's going to give us this season, I think Junior Colson can literally be something like that. Basically a diet old Bobby Wagner. I think Junior Colson from Michigan has that level of talent in him, and you can probably get him in like the third round. Of course, my dog Peyton Wilson, at this point, the only reason he doesn't go in the first round is just because of injury concerns. But the way he killed the combine, if you're watching his tape, it's just no reason he's not a first-round linebacker. To me, he's the best linebacker in this entire draft class. If we're talking about off-ball linebackers, we're not talking about a guy like Dallas Turner, who's more of an edge rusher. We're talking about pure off-ball linebackers that cover and stop the run more than anything else. Peyton Wilson's my favorite linebacker, but I doubt he makes it out of the first round. But if we can somehow get him with our first second-round pick, you sprint to the podium to get him. If he some reason makes it that far. I don't know what we do at tackle at that point, but I would love to have Peyton Wilson because he would be phenomenal. Then you have Jeremiah Trotter Jr., who a lot of people are a fan of. I like him a lot. I don't think I like him as much as a lot of other people do, where they feel like he's like a top 2, top 3 linebacker in this class. I personally prefer a Junior Colson, but I can see him maybe making it to like somewhere in the third round as well. Maybe late second. Maybe we snatch him up there. There's a lot of options out there. A lot of people like Tommy Eichenberg. Maybe you can get him late third, potentially. So we'll see. There's a lot of linebacker options out there. And again, Mykal Walker, I don't think signing him, even though he is fourth on our depth chart, he goes ahead of Anthony Pittman and those other two guys. I don't feel like Mykal Walker stops you from taking a linebacker within the first 3 rounds. I really don't. Now moving on to the Nigerian defensive lineman that we signed. The Commanders are signing International Player Pathway Program participant, defensive lineman Haggai Chisom Ndubuisi. I believe that's how you pronounce it. I'm just going to call him by his first name, Haggai, for the remainder of this video. Formerly of the Broncos, he discovered football on YouTube and eventually landed in Uprise Academy in Ghana, now lands with the Washington Commanders. And time out, because that's an incredible story. He found out about football on YouTube, is in a country, a whole continent that doesn't even care about the sport, and he found a way to make it onto the Washington Commanders roster. That is an incredible story. I don't think people truly understand how crazy and tough that is. That is crazy difficult. It's already hard enough to make it to the NFL as a born and raised American, let alone somebody that didn't have the facilities or the coaching, literally just discovered football on YouTube, said, I have a dream to do that, and then went and made that dream happen. So I'm automatically a huge fan of his. I haven't even taken the time to even watch film on him. I watched a little bit of Mykal Walker film just real quick before I started talking about him, because I'm not just going to talk about somebody and not know anything about him. But this guy, I mean, I don't even think he's played yet from when I tried to look him up. I mean, he was on the Broncos roster for like a little bit, but I don't think he's played in the NFL game. So there's nothing much to really go off of. It's not like he's coming from a college football program where you can pull up his tape. So it's literally like no choice. I don't know how good he is or not. But no matter what, I'm rooting for Buddy. Off top. Also, the Washington Commanders let us know after they announced this signing that beginning this season, specifically the 2024 NFL season, each of the 32 NFL clubs are eligible to fill a 91st roster spot entering training camp and a 17th roster spot on its practice squad reserved for an international player. So that means this guy's going to be able to stick around not only through this whole training camp process, preseason and things like that, because he doesn't count towards the 90-man roster spot. Then eventually when we cut that down to 53, at worst, he can be a 17th practice squad player, because we're allowed to have 16 practice squad players, and because of the International Pathway Program that he's a part of, and shouts out to the NFL for making that an initiative and basically incentivizing all teams to go and find guys like this, because now it's strategically advantageous to just go find somebody to have on your International Pathway Program, because what does it hurt? He's not costing you that much money relatively compared to how much money the NFL makes and how much they usually pay their players, and this guy isn't taking up a serious roster spot. During the off-season, he's just like everybody else on a 90-man roster, but technically he's the 91st. And then during the regular season and all of that type of stuff, playoffs, he's a practice squad player at worst, not taking up a roster spot. And then if he just so happens to be a great player, then imagine, the value in that. The high reward, low risk in that. So shouts out to the NFL for even setting that up that way to where it hurts teams literally none to have this guy around. And shouts out to the Commanders of going and finding him and taking advantage of that. I feel like every team in the NFL should at least have one of these guys on their roster, because why not? They're not consuming up a roster spot. They don't stop you from signing another guy that you potentially like to keep on your 90-man roster. And eventually we're going to have to go from 90 to 53 anyway. So there's some guys that you have on your roster right now that probably aren't even deserving of one of those 90 spots. You just have them right now just to be a camp body. That's what we call them, camp bodies. Just somebody just to practice with and against. And it's just no excuse for every 32 NFL, all of the 32 NFL teams not to at least have somebody like this. And shouts out to the Commanders for being very proactive and making sure they get a guy like this. And even shouts out to Ron Rivera and those guys for having a guy like this, like David Bada, for the past few years. So they've always found a way to do something like this. Shouts out to them. Even Ron Rivera and company took advantage of this. And thank you, Adam Peters, Dan Quinn, and all of those guys for doing the same thing. And speaking of International Pathway Program players, we re-signed Efe Obada, who used to be somebody like that, but he turned out to be so good that we didn't even care about him no longer taking up a 90-man roster spot. We were like, we need him on the 53, not the practice squad. We need him on the 53. So he went from being that 91st player to actually taking up one of the 53-man roster spots that the teams are very limited to. And so you never know if our boy that we just signed, as in Haggai, I gotta remember that name, Haggai Chisholm, and I gotta figure out how to pronounce that last name. You never know if he turns out to be an Efe Obada. But I just felt like this was the perfect time to finally double back and bring up the fact that we did re-sign Efe Obada a few weeks ago, technically as of March 14th. So I know I'm late, but the fact that we were talking about an international pathway program player that we just signed only made perfect sense for that transition. I'm actually kind of proud of myself for that one. You know what I'm saying? International pathway to another guy. But either way, we re-signed Efe Obada, the edge rusher. I love his ceiling. I love his potential. He flashes. Every preseason, he looks like, man, how is that guy not starting? And then, injuries, and he may not be the best edge setter, run stopper type of guy, but I feel like a guy that he's still a guy that we could develop and can turn into something special potentially. I'm not acting like he's about to be the next Michael Parsons or anything like that, but there's definitely some talent and potential there. A guy that he probably should never start and play the majority of snaps, but when he comes in as part of a rotation, fresh off the bench, still fully energized, stamina up and all of that, not fatigued and anything like that. When these other edge rushers that are starting need a breather real quick, I feel like he's a great second punch to come in there for the knockout to get to the quarterback when the offensive lineman already beat up and tired from having to deal with Dorrance Armstrong and Dante Fowler and Cleveland Farrell and all these other edge rushers that we have. And we're probably going to draft a guy like Darius Robinson, maybe even Chop Robinson. When those guys just sit down for a quick breather, for Efe Obada to come off the bench and now you got to deal with that. That's a nightmare for offensive linemen. Again, I'm not acting like he's just some elite player or anything, but in that scheme and that man, everybody's beat down. We're 10 minutes into the first quarter, and here comes this guy fully energized, no fatigue at all, ready and hungry to come after and attack an offensive lineman and get to a quarterback. That's where he produces, and I feel like that's a great role for him. Also, I want to point out the fact that Ron Rivera now has two players that were re-signed by Adam Peters. So shouts out to Ron Rivera for at least getting two guys re-signed, because it was looking ugly for him at first for a while, for a few days. It was nobody re-signed by Adam Peters that was from the Rivera era. Now there's two, because you got to remember, Jeremy Reeves and Jamison Crowder are technically Jay Gruden guys. But now Ron Rivera has Cornelius Lucas, who was re-signed by Adam Peters, and now Efe Obada as well. And I completely agree with my dog Mark Bullock over there from the UK. He tweeted that Obada makes a lot of sense for them to bring back. Quinn values versatile rushers that can line up and rush from all over, and Obada does exactly that. He can play 3 tech, he can play defensive tackle, 5 tech, he can come straight off from the edge. Whatever you need him to do, he's going to do it. So I love the fact that you're bringing in a versatile guy that if you have an injury or, again, somebody's tired at defensive tackle or edge rusher, he can come in and just take their place until that guy's ready to come back for whatever reason why he's out. and hold it down. I love Efe Obada. And again, he has shined. He has flashed at times, man. Sometimes he's looked like, why is that guy not playing more than he already is? So I'm really excited about his future because, again, with the coaching staff that we brought in, I feel like we're going to get closer to people's ceilings and we're going to develop players way better than we did with the Ron Rivera era and things like that. So I feel like Efe Obada, if anything, is going to only be better under Dan Quinn and company than he was with Ron Rivera and company. And I already felt like he flashed quite a bit and showed some potential with them. Imagine what he's going to do with this new coaching staff, but most importantly, this new scheme that they're going to play in, where Dan Quinn does a great job of manufacturing pressure, whether it be from Micah Parsons, who was seen as an off-ball Mike linebacker coming out of the draft. Dan Quinn looked at him and was like, nah, you actually look like you can be an elite pass rusher. And a lot of people questioned it at first, and now look at Micah Parsons, that genius that discovered that, and not only discovered it, but developed it, and also schematically in games found ways to get him to succeed as much as possible, to be in winning situations as much as possible, which Micah Parsons has literally gone out of his way to thank him for on Twitter and in his podcast. Basically said that I'm great. Yeah, I'm a great talent, but Dan Quinn puts me in situations to be even greater. He puts me in situations for me to win even just more than I would naturally win just based off of my talent alone. So imagine that guy getting a hold of a guy like Efe Obada with this high ceiling. I'm very excited. I still think we go edge rusher in the draft, maybe second round, third round at the latest. But Efe Obada is a great guy to bring back. I don't want people forgetting about him. And also, shouts out to John Kahn for bringing this up, because Efe Obada said that only 2 coaches reached out to him when he was in the hospital with a broken leg. Ron Rivera and then Dallas Cowboys defensive coordinator Dan Quinn. Obada said that he was at his lowest point. He hadn't talked to Quinn in years and had been in Atlanta's camp for like 2 to 3 weeks when Dan Quinn was still the head coach for Atlanta. And Dan Quinn still found out that he got hurt and reached out to him. And again, out of all of the coaches on the Commander staff, the only one that reached out to him was our head coach, Ron Rivera. Nobody else. Not Jack Del Rio, not our defensive lines coach, nobody. But Dan Quinn did when he was the defensive coordinator for the Dallas Cowboys. That tells you the type of person that Dan Quinn is. And that also tells you that maybe Dan Quinn is keeping tabs on Efe Obada. Like, if I become the head coach somewhere and I have a chance to sign you as a player, I want you. And I've been keeping track of you, and also just being a great human being. To be, again, the Dallas Cowboys defensive coordinator, he probably didn't even know that he was going to end up getting fired by the Dallas Cowboys or whatever ended up happening to where he ended up becoming our head coach. So he just probably was just being a great human being and reaching out to Efe Obada that way. That is fantastic. Also, Efe Obada said that while in the hospital after a significant leg injury and at his lowest point emotionally, he heard from Dan Quinn, who he had met years before. Dan Quinn specifically texted, quote, "You're a warrior, you'll get through it," unquote. And Obada said that it meant the world to him to hear that from Dan Quinn, and it helped motivate him to go out there and do all that he could to get back from rehab and things like that. So shouts out to Dan Quinn especially for that one. But now, just to give y'all an update, the Washington Commanders have signed 23 players in free agency, including the re-signing of 4 of their own free agents. And that is the most by any team in the NFL by far, because the next team with the most free agent signings are the Dolphins with 15. That is crazy, man. And just purely outside free agents wise, no re-signings from the 2023 Commanders roster. Of course, the Commanders also signed the most free agents that way out of the entire NFL with 19. We have 19 free agents that we brought in from other teams just in the past less than a month. That is crazy, man. This has been a wild ride. It feels like it's been longer than less than a month. It feels like it's been forever since first day of free agency, legal tampering period, and all of that type of stuff. And I've been having fun the whole time, keeping y'all updated with everything. And I love every move that we're making right now. Of course, some of our moves aren't the most exciting, but every move feels like it has a purpose. There just seems to be some strategic move being placed. Like, maybe it's a pawn moving, but that pawn is still very important to the overall chess game that Adam Peters is playing. So I love it. Nothing feels wasted. Nothing feels like a waste of time. Nothing feels like just a complete, what are you doing? Everything feels like it's part of a bigger plan, a bigger picture. So I love what we have going on right now. I'm very excited about, even though none of these guys that we talked about in this video are like projected to be starters, I still love these signings, especially for the value that we're going to end up getting them for, the cheap contracts that they're signed to and things like that. Super excited, especially for the Nigerian defensive lineman. I'm really excited about his potential, and I hope that he can become like the next Efe Obada, that not only is the 91st player on the team, but is one of the 53 that makes the final cuts going into the regular season. Not the practice squad 17th, but one of the 53. I'm really excited about him. But yeah, man, that's the end of this video. Please get in the comment section. Let me know how you feel about everything discussed in the video. Please still farm that like button, still farm the subscription button, still farm the bell next to that subscription button so you get notification each and every time I release an informative and opinionated video just like this one. Let me know how you feel about these 3 signings that we talked about today. The 2 outside free agent signings, one being from Nigeria, and then also the one re-signing an Efe Obada that happened a couple of weeks ago, but this is just my first time covering it, and I just feel like it was the perfect time. Now we can talk about both of the International Pathway Program players in one video, so I just felt like, if anything, it was meant to go this way. But yeah, let me know how you feel about these signings. Do you project any of them to contribute strongly? Do you predict any of these guys to make it 53-man roster? Honestly, between the 3 guys who I would expect to make the 53-man roster, the most is probably Efe Obada. We'll see, though. You never know if Mykal Walker just comes in and balls out and just something clicks in his head. Remember, that coverage ability that he showed in flashes in his rookie season, if that comes out of him, you could probably bet that he's one of the guys most likely to make the roster. But we got to see if Dan Quinn can get that rookie season out of him again, just like when Dan Quinn was the head coach for the Falcons, how he got that coverage ability out of him. If anybody can do it again, it's Dan Quinn, because not only is Dan Quinn a great defensive coordinator, but he was literally the guy that did it for when he was great in coverage for the Falcons that year, a few years ago. But yeah, man, let me know how you feel about all of that. And of course, stay tuned. Do not leave this video without leaving a like. It's free for y'all, and it means the world to me. And I know I'm on vacation. I know I'm supposed to be enjoying vacation, but I can't help but get these updates to y'all. So I really appreciate y'all tuning in, leaving comments, leaving likes, and all of that. I'm going to keep y'all updated. Catch y'all later. Appreciate y'all. I'm out.